Friday afternoon, folks. John Ralston here with fantastic guests on our show, Where the Drone Leads. Today's episode is the downside of drones. And I'd just like to introduce, first of all, your name, sir?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. Thank you, Donald, for coming on the show. Way over here to Hawaii. After all the campaigning, you took some time off, huh? Jay Fidell, I think that's actually you, isn't it? Thanks, Jay, for coming on again. And Kent Snyder, a first-timer on our show. Kent hails from Folsom, California. And Jay, you might be very concerned about that because there is a federal facility in Folsom that may be waiting for you.
I like the federal government. I'll explain that to you more later.
Okay.
I'm one of the few people you know who really like the federal government.
I'm not sure what to make of that. And then we have, of course, John Mullen, one of our frequent flyers, CEO of Promia in San Francisco, California. Once again, the subject, downside of drones. Typically on this show, we have people who are advocates of drones. We had a big drone here last week that was bigger than the table. It flew away when we were done. And we talk about the values that society will see from drones and this sort of thing, time and time again. But as you point out, and we all know, things like this can be turned in the wrong direction if not managed properly. So we really got to get our arms around this whole management of the quote-unquote drone domain. Give us your thoughts on that, Jay, from the downside perspective after being such an advocate for so long.
Well, even under the Obama administration, you know, you'd think he'd be a very ethical, moral kind of guy. The fact is that drones have emerged as a killing machine, and they've killed a lot of people. I mean, you know, arguably for good reason, bad people, but still they've been used as an assassination tool by the military, by the federal government. This gives me some concern because just as the issue arose in the Apple versus FBI affair going on, and I don't agree with Apple, I do not agree with Apple on that, but point is that it has shown us that a lot of people in this country do not like the federal government, do not trust the federal government. So the issue is raised as to whether you can trust the federal government with this kind of apparatus going forward. You know,
in
what prevails, the Constitution or the technology? And you really wonder, you know, whether the assassination machine side of it will somehow prevail going forward.
So we have to be concerned about that, and we're talking about the civil environment here, right?
Yes, well, another point is we have technology going on in all directions now. We have fantastic computer technology going on. We have biotechnology that really blows your mind going on. You know, we have telecommunications technology, it's just amazing. And we have drone technology
By the way,
itself.
we do not permit monologues on the show. Have you ever talked to the guy who runs this place?
I'll explain later why that's a private joke. Point, and I just want to make this point.
There's a point here.
Do your monologue, as I know you will, is all these technologies are coming together. And at the end of the day, it's rhetorical, but I ask you both, don't you think that at the end of the day, when all these technologies come together, we have a very powerful combination of technologies, all focused in drones, and drones already have a history of being a killing machine. The federal government is going to have that. It's going to have priority. It's going to have control. It's going to have, you know, it's going to have it together, and it's going to be able to do it probably quietly, you know, secretly, using all that stuff. Does that give you concern?
You must have had a bad night last night, and that monologue was fantastic, by the way. So this is a great stage setter because what you're saying is things that as technology evolves, these things that are useful to us in positive ways can also be turned against us, and we may not even see it coming. And whether the federal government is, the question becomes the level of involvement of the federal government. There's many departments.
Actually, I didn't say what federal government, did I? It was something in the, I think it was the MIT Technology Review newsletter this morning about how the Russians have taken on, you know, technology with drones. They're developing drones. Isn't that hard to emulate what we do? And so I think it's going to be a lot of governments, not just our government.
The essence of what is underlying all that, I think, and we ask Kent and John in a minute, but I think we're going to have to figure out how to characterize what they're all about. Whether they're little drones like this table model we have here or big gigantic ones, there's something going on. And we have to characterize the electronic aspect of it, the tie to the people who are involved in it, the potential downside consequence of its operation, and then make sure that we allow and promote those aspects that are positive, and make sure we understand where there's a deviation from that, and then go correct the deviation. So I think step one, and let's ask Kent. Kent, you're new to the show, and
Sure.
you've seen how it works. We never know how it works. We
never
don't
know
allow
how it works.
monologues.
No,
You
no,
saw
no.
that, right? So that wasn't a monologue.
Yeah, you haven't seen any monologue already. You're going to see some more monologues here today.
Sounds good.
In fact, why don't you fool them and make a monologue of their
Yeah.
own?
Well, I don't have
self?
any monologues.
Okay.
But
No
I can work
monologues.
towards one.
Okay.
Yeah, well, so I look at it from a completely different perspective. I mean,
That's what we like, multiple perspectives.
I understand there are some nefarious uses of the UAS, and I'm not characterizing it anything that was previously alluded to. But for us, you have to understand that it's a new dimension. It's just another level, in the construct we're operating in. And there's a lot of military applications, but as you spoke to, there's a lot of commercial uses and civilian uses that we can't ignore. But it really changes, I'll use the analogy of a 3D chessboard. It really changes the game, because where you previously had boundaries and fences and guards, these really change it for everyone. And because you can put radios on these things, because you can carry payloads, because you can put video feeds on these things, it really, obviously addresses all the, becomes an issue for privacy and access, where previously people didn't have to be so worried about it. So for us, we're very concerned, but like anything else, you have to control it because it's not going away. And so there's a lot of things that I think you have to work toward. And you can take an opinion or have an opinion, but at the end of the day, we have to kind of understand where we are with it and understand how we touch it, how we feel it, and how we interact with it. And so we look at it from the perspective of, okay, it's a platform. However, it's also part of this whole new spectrum, this whole electromagnetic environment. It's just a conduit for electromagnetics and how you transfer information, how you transfer access. So for us, I mean, it's real, and we study it all the time. We have a whole lot of people interested in understanding how, one, you can leverage it, but how, two, you can protect yourself from it accordingly. And
that brings up a really interesting point, and John can tell us about his Rose Bowl experience of a couple months ago, but as you said, at the electromagnetic spectrum and this sort of thing, everything we're dealing with, drones, everything that our houses are going to be controlled, cars are controlled, fire trucks are controlled, everything's controlled by electromagnetic communications these days. So we're marching, whether it's a drone or not, we're marching into a world of incredible electromagnetic interconnectivity, or maybe not interconnectivity, and potential fault. And so I'm just imagining a fire department 10 years from now, when every civilian's got his model drone, and all the agencies, public safety agencies, have theirs, and the fire department has theirs, and everybody shows up at the scene for a fire. We're going to have to deconflict all that electromagnetic motion going on
Absolutely.
in order to not lose control of the fire truck, let alone anything else. So how do we, and John, we'll ask you for this next, how do we sort of think of that incredibly complex, interdependent network of electromagnetic communication taking place, which this is just one example of.
Right.
How do we think about that, John, and look at it and characterize it and see how it's going? Is it going in a direction harmful to us, or going in a direction helpful to us?
Well, there's about 100 dimensions there you just brought
Yeah.
up. The one that I immediately go to is the new Verizon test here in San Francisco with the 5G. We know about 3G, 4G, all of this. 5G now is being tested at 1,000 times the speed of 4G. And this is the new broadband we're all going to have in our pocket here pretty soon with the next generation of phones, right? And it's scheduled for 2020, but they're way ahead of the mark right now. So that's only one piece of waveforms. There's waveforms all over the place. There are people that are extremely sensitive to waveforms and actually get physical reactions to them. There's people that claim that they're harmful to all of us. When they first brought in those smart meters for home meter reading, there were a lot of people up in arms about how that would hurt us. And then a lot of studies came forward and found that the most harmful waveforms in our home is probably your microwave. And so you study this sort of thing. You asked earlier about harmful stuff. There's people that claim if they have a high tension power line near them, they're hurt, right? But we are constantly inundated with radio waves in all wave shapes and forms, all frequencies, all, thank God we have our ionosphere to protect us from the gamma waves, or real dead from the outer space, right? So I think the jury's still out. But I take it back to the automobile. We deal with drones, we have for a few years, not as long as your company, the Sierra Nevada company, but we deal with float drones and subsurface drones, and also land-based drones, and as well as airborne. And most people, when they talk drones, they think flying ones, but we've been working with all different kinds, right? But I take it back to the automobile. If you're talking about the common man and how do they kind of deal with this technology, you go back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, when you had, carts with horses on the road, and every now and then you had this crazy person with this radical device come driving by, and they could crash into you, they could hurt you, all these things. And as Jay was saying, you've got legislative control, you've got highway patrol, you've got state, you've got federal, you've got speed limits, you've got people that manufacture cars and they better have brake pads and good tires on them. You got regulation in many dimensions. You have insurance companies, and I think that's where we're going with this industry.
So let's just pick up on that thought after our first break here, John, but I think what you're saying is there's an order that will start to prevail over time. Just in the case of the automobile, it was sort of a physical reality. Now we have an electromagnetic and a three-dimensional speed and time and catastrophic orientation type additional layers to that picture. So we got to figure out how to make that picture, and then that'll give us a way to characterize what is going on here in order to control it. We'll pick that up right after the break.
Great.
Aloha, I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, and one of our delights is to be partnered with Think Tech Hawaii and produce programs every week. Every Monday at 2 o'clock, we have a show called E Hana Kako, which means let's work together. So we bring people from all across the nation and the country, and certainly throughout the islands together here to talk with them about how to work together, and how to work together to do the following: to build a better economy, a better government, a better society. So if you're interested in the research of our think tank, the Grassroots Institute, or if you're interested in how that's applied at the governmental and community and business levels, you'll enjoy the fascinating conversations with our guests on E Hana Kako every week on Think Tech Hawaii at 2 o'clock on Mondays. Until our next show, I'll see you. Aloha.
Friday afternoon, folks. Ted Ralston here again with our Think Tech Hawaii show where the drone leads. The episode today is downside of drones. We're just talking about, we kind of got off track a little bit. We're talking about a wild mix of electromagnetic signals and what that means to us as the future arrives. We've got to think about that in terms of how systems operate within that complex electromagnetic spectrum that's changing and dynamic. In particular, if we depend on something like a fire truck or a drone or a heart monitor, we got to make sure that it is ironclad and it can actually survive through whatever we throw at it in terms of electromagnetic
As I told you during the break, I mean, to me, the salient question is, are these devices going to interfere with each other? You talk about electromagnetic.
Yep.
John touched on the injury question about whether the electromagnetic waveforms can hurt you. But putting that aside, the question is whether the drones will interfere with each other.
Let's take that.
Because that could be a real problem.
It is already a problem.
Ken said that they do.
Yeah.
Let me just introduce our little friend here to let Kent then pick it up and take it from there. We've got two communication systems on this little guy. That's a dipole, obviously, so anybody who's been in radio would know that's a 2.4 gigahertz dipole, obviously connection-wise. Here's a video down, and those pieces of electronics communicate with this ground controller here. So this guy is talking to the communications link over here, and this is the antenna receiving the video down. Then we also have GPS on here, and we could have other communication devices for talking to air traffic management or talking to the incident commander. It could be a complete layered effect of a lot of different communications, some operating in the same spectrum. Even my cell phone, if I have to call on the cell phone to talk to somebody, it's going to be in the same thing.
Sure.
So we've got a lot of competition for that spectrum.
Absolutely.
And it's going to get worse, isn't it, as time goes on. If we get one of these things in a fire scene is one thing, 20 of them is a whole different situation.
Sure. Well, let me bring it out to the macro level. I mean, we work in industry and we work with the government. And in the military, and this is open source information, but within the Department of Defense, they see this as the next spectrum or the next domain. I mean, they see it on parity with the land domain, the sea domain, the air domain.
The electromagnetic domain?
The electromagnetic
Really?
environment, absolutely. Okay. So it has parity, and that's a very significant statement when you think about what you compare that to or contrast that to. And the reality is this, it's finite. You know, you don't see it. It's ethereal, but it's there, and you can't occupy the same space with multiple, links, or communications links. So what happens in a congested environment where it's not regulated, and you're trying to control this thing for good, as an example, and someone else has another purpose or trying to use that same channel, it's gonna cause conflict, or it's gonna be interference. And with that, someone's gonna lose their connectivity with their system. So
That's the net effect of it, if you lose connectivity.
So it's not a net effect.
One drone is
partial.
interfere with the other one, so one of them has to go down, or maybe both of them have to go
You
down.
could lose both of them.
Right. Yeah, so they don't need to physically collide, they can electromagnetically collide.
Let me ask you a tech question, though. Isn't it possible to slice and dice these spectrums or parts of spectrum so they can actually talk to each other and they're smart enough to know when they're being interfered with?
Absolutely. But it does still run out. There's not an infinite amount of multiplexing or dividing or, sharing spectrum. There's a lot of novel approaches, but at the end of the day, that's usually a whole lot of sophistication, and then it's usually cost prohibitive to have that kind of technology.
We don't have it ubiquitous now.
No.
Drones don't have it.
By no means.
But that brings up an interesting point, because something like this, which is out there today, and they're producing 100 a month of these, they're what they are, whatever radios they've got. So if we
Right.
get into different spectrum management, we have to then retrofit these with some kind of a software-defined radio or some other way to let it operate in that newly defined environment.
It also opens the question of getting hijacked. So this controls that, right? But I got a bigger, better one that's more sophisticated, and I'm behind the billboard over there, and I try my machine, and I hijack that drone.
Absolutely.
And I make it do bad things, and you don't even know what I'm doing, and you can't control it. I thought I saw this on Mission Impossible.
Well, that happens. That is, I've seen it. We talked about that a couple days ago, having seen that occur at one particular occasion. You can spoof them, you can hijack them, you can even cause them to see a wrong picture of the GPS satellite constellation and then relocate themselves because you've given them a fake GPS location.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of ways. So if you knew what was inside here and how this software operates,
You could override it.
You could think of some way to cause it to, you could trick it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, this opens the whole topic, and I think we should talk about it, is the anti-drone drone. For example, I think you and I talked about this before, the Israelis, they have a technique for knocking a drone out of the sky. You know what they do? Remember that?
go.
They drop a piece of rope on it. They get drone B to drop a piece of rope on drone A. End of story for drone A.
Well, I just saw one today, some outfit in, I don't know where it wasn't in the US, has this thing that's like a Ghostbuster gun, and you aim it at the
Right.
drone, it's got lead compensation and all, shoot it, and it comes out with a Spider-Man type net, 100 meters away, and it wraps around the thing, and it all flutters to the ground together. So there's just all kinds of mystical ones. But let's turn to John for a minute.
John's enjoying this.
Yeah, he's laughing too much. So John, you can't have that much fun here at our expense.
Well, our whole background is cyber attack and defense. So, and now it's coming to the kinetic realm because of the drones. But, some of the drones we work with, they don't need to be controlled from the ground. I'm sure the gentleman from the Sierra Nevada company understands this very well, where they've already been pre-programmed. They've already got their game. It doesn't matter if you drop their link. It doesn't matter, right? And then I've seen places where they're training hawks and eagles to go after drones. So you've got actual birds hitting them in the sky, besides others. I mean, it's an entire spy versus spy versus spy, obviously. We've got a design where we protect the inside of the casing of the drone with some, like a Faraday box, so that an electromagnetic pulse can't hurt it, sort of thing. So, I mean, there's all sorts of different dimensions to this, no doubt about it. And if you get into the waveform, let's say you get into their waveform, now you're in a cyber realm where you're actually taking over the signal and maybe taking a different dimension. And one of the things, Jay, you mentioned about the spread spectrum, I don't know if you're aware that the actress Hedy Lamarr was the person who invented that. She was actually an intelligence agent besides being an actress, and she invented spread spectrum for all radio forms way back when.
How come I was not advised of this earlier?
I don't know.
You didn't have a need to know.
But no, it's always, Back to the Future. A lot of the stuff we're talking about now was really, especially electronic warfare. I'm in the realm of cyber warfare, but the whole concept of electronic warfare goes back much earlier. with jamming signals and sort of not so much on a digital realm, but more an analog realm where you go after the signal on different types of dimensions. And if you do it right, the adversary thinks that their device is broken. They don't think that you came after them. See, so it's kind of, again, spy versus spy world here with different kinds
But
of.
what we're doing by generating these kind of drones and making them available at low cost to fire departments and police departments is really opening up our own public safety to this kind of future manipulation. But even this conversation is difficult to imagine because it's not something you can visualize. We can visualize the physical reality of the traffic situation that John mentioned, roads and curbs to keep cars on roads, and license plates so you know who it is, and tests so you get your license. But in the world of the third dimension you mentioned, Ken, a bit ago, about the electromagnetic spectrum that's emerging, of which these are simply points within, that's a tough thing to get your arms around and to generate an evaluation of. We don't know, is our spectrum and its ability to support this kind of operation healthy and strong and getting stronger, or are we getting penalized in some way? We have to shut some function down in order to protect the critical functions.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, my only comment to that, it's almost making it more convoluted. I mean, again, we talk about radios, I mean, that's what we're alluding to, and these being transport platforms, and you start adding multifunctionality onto these platforms. You start extending, the ability to propagate waves in ways that weren't necessarily controlled, or you lose your ability to control them. I mean, not only are you, and we spoke to this at the onset, I mean, you want to have some kind of accountability for the users of these things. But when you start getting to this environment where you have multiple nodes in the air and they can propagate, and you have a lot of waveform protocols that can communicate maybe among several platforms, it's really hard to figure out whose platform is whose. So not only are they crashing to the ground, but then you can, you could do something nefarious, or you could not be accountable for your actions, and you can then at that point you start becoming less responsible with what you're doing. So I think it just makes it a lot harder for everybody, and so there has to be ways to control it.
And that leads to, I think, one great product of this discussion, and that is who's on top. Somebody has got to control these things. As John Mullen just said, you can have them pre-programmed. So there's not even anybody on the ground is actually controlling them real time. So somebody has got to control the skies. And I predict for you guys, it won't be long before we have the drone fights, like the dog fights of World War I, right? Where the drones are fighting to dominate the skies. Who comes out on top? Who has air power among the drones?
Yeah,
Watch.
Drone superiority,
Yes,
the
yes,
thing we're talking
yes,
about here,
yes.
right. But going back to something that's really essentially important here, as we think about providing something to the fire department, Honolulu Fire Department, they cannot be provided with something that has any of these fault consequences. We have to make it ironclad, and in such a way that the device itself, or the multiple devices, operate, and they operate when they're all together, and they are defended against anybody attempting to spoof them or take them away.
Yeah.
And this is something, again, that you don't have to deal with that with your Scott Air Pack. No one's going to hijack your Scott Air Pack. It's a reliable product. No one's going to hijack your fire truck. But now we have this whole new dimension. It's a mind boggler, isn't it, in terms of how we're going to put this out to make it available for its goodness,
Right.
but also have it ironclad.
You talk about, I'll use the term hardening.
Yeah,
You want to
okay.
make it, you want to make it ironclad. The problem is that in a perfect world, you can design an architecture. You could design a community where you say, here you stay here. But the problem is you can't regulate all those around you. And they can introduce a whole lot of platforms and energy, if you will, into your electromagnetic environment and really disrupt it.
So what that comes back to, and I think John, we'll pick up John at the end of the next break here, but I think that comes down to some kind of a system to detect any adverse operations that are going on. Let's take the fire department. We have to provide them the equipment, but we also have to provide them some kind of an assurance shell. They have to be able to understand and know that the environment around them can support this kind of operation and isn't being hacked by people on the outside. Let's talk about that if we get back from this next 1-minute break.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on Think Tech. This show is so very dear to my heart. We talk with artists of various different ilk here about the process that they go through for their art. So we talk about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they do it. And it's a show that is inspiring. This is what I hear from people all the time. And a show that will teach you something, sometimes something about yourself. I hope you'll join us. The show is Center Stage. It's on Think Tech every Wednesday at 2 o'clock. We'll see you then.
Aloha, how you doing? I'm Gordo the Tech Czar, here on Think Tech Hawaii, where we co-host Hibachi Talk, where we talk about technology and bring in all kinds of cool guests. Also, my co-host with me today is
Andrew the security guy. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Think Tech Hawaii, and thanks for watching Hibachi Talk. We also have Angus.
And you there, lad? It's Angus. I bring in all kinds of wee things. Oh, look, you can see my lips moving.
I think it's 8 Gs
Here
on
we
a
are,
human.
folks. Ted Ralston here with our fantastic collection of guests on the show, Where the Road Leads, Where the Drone Leads, and the downside of drones we're talking about today. Jay Fidell, who kind of ambled into the station here, looking for a job, I think, or something.
Yeah,
I'm not
looking
quite
for
sure.
something to do this
Something to
afternoon.
do this afternoon. Ken Snyder, who's here, an aerospace consultant, who's here for the PACOM S&T conference and heavily involved in the future of complex systems, we'll say it that way. John Mullen, standing by in San Francisco at Promia Corporation. Anyway, we were talking just before the break in this conversation that went in several different directions here, but we come down to the point of we have to understand the static and dynamic environment in which systems we produce are operating and make sure they can be operated safely by the people into whose hands we put them.
Right.
Gun manufacturers had to solve that problem. Automobile manufacturers had to solve that problem. Airplane manufacturers had to solve that problem. This problem is much more complicated because we have a ground station, we have a communication link, and we have this guy on the other end working together. And then multiply that 100,000 times, we'll say. And so we have a complex, interdependent environment that we need a meter somehow that the battalion commander at the fire department can look at that meter and say, yeah, I'm good to go. We got a good, strong environment. We can operate these things. There's no risk. Or if there is a spectrum problem of some kind, we have to then start reducing what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Well, on a minimal level, you know, on a
Okay.
sort of low.
Thanks, Jay, for bringing the conversation down to a minimal
Now, I'm
level.
trying to bring it down to a minimum level. But you have something, what do they call it in flying now? You have something that a transponder, it transponds back to home base and it says, yes, I'm here. And it identifies
Well, it
the
says who I
aircraft
am,
and all
right?
that.
Identify friend
okay.
or foe. Yeah.
Yeah, but you could do something like that, couldn't you?
Absolutely.
Say, I mean, you know, from the base, it asks the drone, are you okay? And the drone comes back and says, I'm okay. All my systems are okay.
And the
I
environment I'm
validate.
operating in has plenty of margin for me to operate my
Whatever
my
it is, you know, you get sensors and, you know, and various measurements, metrics of how well it's doing or not doing, and it keeps talking. It keeps talking to the guy on the ground, and the guy on the ground can have some level of confidence that the drone hasn't been compromised. They already have that kind of thing going, right? So it's just a matter of, and that's minimal, because I suppose you can fool that too. But in any event, so if the drone comes back to this communication with the ground, and it says, you know, I'm not so good. I got a problem. I got electromagnetic problems. People are shooting me. They're dropping ropes on me. Whatever it is, you know. So what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You just write them off? Do you land the drone? Do you blow the drone up? Do you launch another drone? What do you do?
All those are part of the fault accommodation management. It has to be thought through very carefully and then accompanied by electronic sensors and systems that do the calculation as to what that means. What does that mean on a reliability scale of 0 to 1? Is this thing up at 1 or is it a half? Is it 0? And that's common in the airplane industry today, and we have to translate that over to this business. I think the thing that's interesting to me is that there are no standards yet. There are standards in aviation, there are none here. And we're going to see standards coming about starting in this year. ASTM is going to be creating TSOs, technical service orders or standard orders for certain aspects of drone operation. Well, we hear that coming. So there'll be a lot of hue and cry about that because people will have to re-equip these or take what we have today and get rid of them because they're not going to conform.
Right.
So we have a lot of re-engineering to do to achieve the level of that interdependent reporting you're speaking of. But it's coming.
Yeah.
And we'll see it in spectrum in some way. But once again, it goes back to measuring what we've got. How do we measure those various? How do you measure badness? How do you know when you yourself are not?
Well.
You know, you look at your bank account, but these things can't look at their bank account. And so,
Well, that goes to another level, though. So that's a sort of a minimalist approach. I'm the government, okay? I have this air corridor, and I told you guys not to fly drones in this air corridor. I'm the FAA or whatever agency ultimately gets this. I don't want you there, and that you know that. That's in my rules, in my charts. Everybody knows that, and yet you're there. Now, I'll assume that A, you're breaking the rules, and B, you could be doing something bad. I want you out of there. Now, I can't control you. You're controlled autonomously or from the ground by somebody I can't see or meet or know, or I don't even know where he is.
Point to, sure.
So I have got to get you out of there. I've got to control that airspace. That means a fight, doesn't it? That means a World War I fight. I've got to get some other machine to come into the airspace and blow you up.
Nope.
Because I
like
told you can't come in there.
I like
right?
that.
Don't we have, isn't that the ultimate result?
that'd be a layered approach, my view. And you start with enforcing through those standards orders that are going to start coming out, a onboard system called geo-fencing or something like that that says, here's the location, you can't be on this side of this. If you're
Right.
on this side, you got to shut your power off. Or before you get there, you have to reverse the direction you're going.
John had something.
John.
But we talked about this before, Ted, in an earlier call, and I don't think you leave it up to the human pilot. You have to make the drone not be able to go. In my opinion, you know, we've dealt with so many different systems, and when you're dealing with humans in the 300 million in the U.S., if anybody can do something, they're going to do it. You can't say on your honor, don't do this. Thank you very much. It's not going to work. So you have to, and this is what I thought, 6 months ago, all the drones that are out today are have to be thrown away because you have to introduce a piece of hardware that is also with software that won't go to places that are not authorized. Just won't go, okay? And then beyond that, as far as communications, you have to have what they do in the big fiber networks, MPLS, where you have a prioritized scheme, and the authorities have overriding channel control over certain comms. So if the firemen or the policemen or the military or the Marine need a certain comms, nobody else gets it. Thank you. There's no question here. It's not a fight. It's like, it's not allowed. So you can't go here because the drone won't go there. And if anybody in the United States sells a drone that doesn't have this control in it, they go to jail.
Find me first, John. I'm behind the billboard. I made my thing at home in the basement with my friend the hacker.
Right, that's
And you
fine.
can't find me. And I made a thing that does not have the device you want to be in every drone. And I'm up to bad things. How do you stop me?
Just like right now, you can also make a car with a jet engine on the back. It's not legal. You put it on the road, you're either going to die or going to get caught. But yeah, you can do it. You can make a gun. You can make a Gatling gun that shoots fire 50 feet. You can do it. You're going to go to jail. I mean, there's a lot of things.
Catch me, John.
Yeah.
Sounds like we have a conspiracy going on here of some kind. But that's what Folsom Prison's all about, isn't it, for a guy like Jay?
I will tell you, though, there's a lot of apprehension because the proliferation of these small class 1, especially the small class 1, because they can carry payload, because they can really invade people's privacy. At the end of the day, though, we can get our arms around it. And what you spoke to earlier, eventually, when you're going to have qualified or authorized drones and authorized spectrums with authorized algorithms that control the device, that have, they're there on purpose, performing a value-added function to society or the community, they're gonna be there. And eventually, we're gonna wean ourselves off of these wild, wild west platforms, this wild, wild west environment. But you're gonna have to get away from it. And the good news, though, is that today there's a whole lot of processing capability, and there's tools out there. Let me just say that can really find these things. I mean, you really can. I mean, you get out there and the RF, again, even though it's ethereal, there's a lot of technology out there that processes very fast, has a lot of sensitivity, and you can see these things. So it's a question of, making sure that the government, has a want or need, and they put their energy or resources against it, and and then focus upon, getting the tools out there that can regulate this
Okay.
and can find these things.
I have a drone, and it's going to carry some C4 type really powerful explosive. Okay, that's the first part. And I have not put any controlling mechanisms on it. I'm a hacker, okay? And I control it. Take a stadium full of 50,000 people watching a ball game. The drone is flying over the stadium, lowering into the stadium, obviously ready to do some dastardly deed. How do I stop it?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, there's a lot of people that I've heard express those concerns, and there are technologies out there that can address that terrible scenario.
Let me suggest something. That's something kind of what John had experienced at the Rose Bowl recently, is starting down that path. Because there's the electronic determination that we can find, as you mentioned, through spectrum assessment analysis and looking at this guy shaking hands with this guy. Now we see a pair going on here. Now we have something we can pay attention to. But besides that, there's the whole social flow. Where did that drone come from? Somebody had to bring it in a case like that case over here on the ground. Somebody had to set it up and launch it. And that can be discovered also. So there's a flow of events that occur prior to that launch that if we had to worry about it, there's technology for extracting features from video and this sort of thing and finding a guy carrying a case like that. So there's layered approaches to this. It's really an intelligence
what I
problem.
hear you saying is that you could do
The most important thing is to lock you up because you seem to be the center of
well,
this problem.
you can lock me up afterward, but that hasn't helped the 50,000 people.
Yeah.
What I see coming, be interested in your technology look at this, is like an FAA tower control, where you have technology looking at every drone in the air, because it can identify the drones, right? And you can look at a whole community, a whole city, and you have a plot of every single drone that's flying. Could that be? Could you do that?
It's there now.
Is that right?
Yeah. Not a tower, but you can certainly do that. There's no doubt. That's what we're doing at the Rose Bowl. There, how many drones in the air? You can see each one and where the controller is immediately. No doubt. And you can, if you have the Navy laser weapon, you can shoot it out of the sky before it even gets 15 feet in the sky. So I don't think the same kind of fear is happening as you put it out. There is the ability to see these things in the air. No doubt about it.
So what we have to do is find a way that technology becomes available to the Rose Bowl or to the stadium you're speaking of or the fire department, so that we can have that sense of sanity and the sense of cleanliness of the spectrum around us and detect anything that's intruding and then take it down.
Yeah. Yeah, the good news is forensics still applies, physics still applies.
Yes.
And it's just about putting the resources to bear where they really need to be, because again, it changes the game. It removes barriers, and then it's much more sophisticated, and you can remotely, do dangerous things with these potentially. So, I mean, it's just understanding that's the problem set, and then just making sure you focus on it. But again, yeah, the physics are there. I mean, even though it's ethereal, you don't see it. I mean, everything has telltale signatures. I mean, they can find and trace a bullet, because of the scarring in a barrel. They can trace, these things. Not to that exact science, I don't know. But I'll tell you out there that you see things in the spectrum. We just don't have, our eyes don't register RF. But when you get out there, there's a lot of technology, a lot of spectral analysis tools that can really kind of provide warning about this kind of platform operating in close proximity or in dangerous proximity.
Well, it sounds like that's a kind of frontier. We have frontiers about the technology of the drone itself, about the communications with the drone and all that, but this is another frontier and it sounds like it's something you could make some money with, actually.
Well, as drones are going to come and go, but the counter drone or the protection against adversity is going to be fixed forever. So that's actually a good big part of the market right there, is the protection side of this thing, which is something that Hawaii could get involved in. Think Tech Hawaii could become part of that.
Piece of rope about that big.
If that rope's in the right place. The question is getting that rope to the right place at the exact right time. Or if this guy starts to grow protection around him so that he doesn't care about rope, then your countermeasure doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, one tit for tat.
It's a real elegant solution as long as there's only maybe one or two, and you had a priori knowledge that it was going to be there, and you could line up. I don't know. I don't think solving it with a physical approach is probably the best.
No.
Your critical way to protect yourself.
But Kent and John have both outlined for us the elements of detection and discovery and expression of the picture that we're dealing with. And they're all in different layers, and they're handled by different companies, and there's no one agency in the U.S. government that's sort of thinking about that right now, in my view. And certainly for the military there is, but I don't think there is on the civil side. And so once again, we are challenged, I think, to figure out how to take that type of domain protection and make it translated down to the fire department and the police department and the health department and the water department orientation at costs that they can afford.
Right.
And that'll be another career.
It goes back to, you know, I think
forever.
somebody is going to have to be in charge. It can't be a free-for-all.
Well-
And that's going to have to be the government.
And that's an interesting point, because the way things are going, we come from big airplanes, big airline transport airplanes and such. They come from a very rigid specification control, TSOs and such. As we get into the light sport aircraft, and which is going to be the model for how these are managed, we get into this what's called consensus requirements, which is where the industry and the operators get together and say, here's how we're going to do it. Everybody on the same team, let's go do this. If you're not doing it that way, you can't sell it. But it's an industry, agency, operator consensus. It's a whole different way to think about standards. And that's actually good, because it brings the user into the game. But it is also weaker than the way we do it today in the heavy airplanes. So we'll have to deal with this emerging concept of a crowdsourcing of requirements, so to speak, and a crowdsourcing of control. Once again, these things are going to be a career that can go on for a long, long time. And I think whoever figures this out and can put it in a box that goes with a fire truck, so
Right.
that the fire department can see that there's no problem. We can operate all of our stuff just like we planned. That is such an important piece of technology to be developed that right alongside the systems themselves.
Right.
So we are coming.
This has been a really full show. In fact, I would say it's been a fulsome show.
It is, right. And there's a place for you there, by the way. And Kent can arrange when he's back in California, he can he'll send you a private, personal invitation. How's
Now
that?
you know the true meaning of the word monologue.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let me just ask our first timer, Kent, what are your thoughts that you'd like to have people take away from hearing you on this show?
No, hey, so I really appreciate the opportunity to come on the show. It's really been a lot of fun. I know a little bit more about monologues now. I don't know if I'll be more prepared next time, but I think it's really a great topic, and it's something people really have to address, and I think we spoke to it in a very direct way, where you have to understand there's multiple dimensions to it, and there's regulations involved, there's potential for a bunch of bad things happening, but there's also the fact that it's part of what we are and what we do now, and how we live our lives, that we have to just kind of understand it and embrace it, and treat it like analogous to these other systems that we work around and with. So I'm pretty excited. I'd like to continue a conversation when we want to start working towards shaping public view on how to support making sure that this doesn't get out of control and works to our benefit in the future.
And that's one thing we want to do here on this show, keep bringing these things up so the public gets aware of the terms and the issues and the thoughts. John, how about you? Final thoughts?
Well, I really appreciate the conversation. Every time we have one of these shows, I see dimensions I've not thought of and new things, and it's great to have this. I really appreciate it, and it is a common theme. I think there's some stuff we can take from the old days, and also a lot of stuff from the new technologies, but it's kind of back to the future in many ways, I think. It's going to take time. I think it's going to take time, iterating on different dimensions, from insurance and control and government and manufacturers and safety and all of that. It's not easy, but it's exciting, I tell you that.
Okay, and you two guys have to get together. John's in San Francisco, you're not far away when
Absolutely.
next week happens, and get together face to face. And Jay,
Well, I see.
no monologue allowed. Since you're heading for Folsom, the question is, what kind of license plates do you want to make?
Dogfight. And I want the movie rights.
All right, movie rights. There's our man.
That'll buy us.
Okay, folks, thanks very much, and we'll see you all next Friday.
Okay, thank you.